welcome to lecture 39. This is continuing. Last lecture 38 was on the Messiah or Christ, and I showed the relationship between those two words and the connection to the anointed. And then I mentioned about three candidates for the job, and this lecture is going to be on today's date, which in the Jewish calendar is Gimmel Tammuz, and it's the day. Three events that I'm going to talk about that happened on this particular day, and I'm going to show a link between them. This is based on a book which I wrote some time ago called Gimmel Tammuz, and that's the Hebrew. Tammuz was a Babylonian god, but we won't go into that part of it in this particular lecture. I'm going to draw from the beginning of this book and a little bit from the end, and it's to do with the Messiah, and we'll see how relevant this date is to the Messiah. First of all, the first event that took place of repute on this particular day is in the Bible. It's in the book of Joshua, and it's called the Battle of Gibeon. The story goes that Joshua was told by God not to make any alliance with any of the nations that live within Canaan, but nations that were outside of Canaan, that was okay. And Gibeon, who saw how successful Joshua was with his army, the children of Israel, and in destruction of Jericho and the city of Ai, and after that they sent two men to tell a lie, basically, that they were from outside of Canaan, and they wanted to make a covenant of peace between them and the Israelites, and they managed to deceive Joshua, and having made the covenant of peace between them, Joshua couldn't then retract from that. And there was a king, or one of the Ammonite kings, called Adoni-Sedek, who didn't like that, and he thought, well, before we're going to attack the Israelites, we'll attack Gibeon for the being traitor to their people. So he gathered another 4 kings together, so the 5 kings, and they went to attack Gibeon. And the Gibeonites sent a message to Joshua saying, the Amorites are coming to destroy us, come and help us. Come. And so Joshua gets his army together and they go and fight. And the event that takes place of spectacular, miraculous phenomena is when Joshua, the Midrash states that day that they fought, on the day that they were winning, was a Friday, and they wanted to finish this war before the Sabbath, which comes in the evening, and so to do that he wanted the longer day. So Joshua asked God to make the sun still in Gibeon. Obviously it's up in its azimuth and its height, and the moon should stay still in the valley of Ayalon. And those two places, earthwise, they're very near to each other. Ayalon is well, there's 2 actual possibilities. One is in the tribe of Dan, which is right in the north of Israel. That's where the valley of Ayalon is. And Gibeon is in the area where Jerusalem is. So it would seem that if you've got the moon up there and the sun up there and they're standing still, are they at a distance from each other in the sky, or are they very close? And at the end of this book I give 2 scenarios as what could have possibly happened, because if they were very close there could have been what we might call an eclipse of the sun, or were they at a distance, in which case what you would have seen of the moon in the middle of the day would have been a crescent, because the sun would have been shining at an angle. You'd see a more full moon if the sun is on the horizon, and one horizon, and the moon is on the other horizon. Then you get a full moon in the early hours of the day, or early hours of the night, before nightfall. So, but if it's right up in the sky, then you'd only get a crescent. So there's some interesting relationships here between the whole sun and the idea of the crescent, which is part of Islam. And so that was one event that took place. That Friday was Gimmel Tammuz. Okay, so I'm going to give you a gematria to start off with. What is this date? This is the day's date today, Gimmel Tammuz. We put a Gimmel, that's the Hebrew letter, so I'm writing script. I write block letters, that's Gimmel, Tammuz. And if I find the normal value of those words, Gimmel is 3, Taf is 400, 40, 6 and 7, I will get 456, and that I call the normal value, the regular value. And what happened on that day was that Gibeon, the city of Gibeon, was liberated from the attack of the Amorites. And if you take the word liberation, so that's liberation. Well, now I'm going to use the normal values again, where L is the 30th, I is the 9th, B is the 2nd, all the way along there. I will get 456. So I see a connection between liberation and Gimmel Tammuz. And that's interesting because the next two events are also connected to liberation. I was talking about in my lecture about Messiah and Christ, about Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He is the 7th of 7 Rebbes of Lubavitch, and the first one was Rabbi Schneer Zalman. Interesting word Zalman. If you take Zain, Zal, Lamed, Mem, and Nun, the final Nun can be either 50 or 700. If we take it to be 700, so we get 40 for Mem, 30 for Lamed, and 7 for Zain, and you'll get 777, which is an interesting number. Sometime I'll show you how that's connected to Mashiach. So we'll leave that one out. So he was the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, and there were 7 in total. And the 6th one, he was called the Friedecker Rebbe, which means the earlier Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchok. He was incarcerated in prison in Spalerno in Russia because he had created an underground network of schools educating Jewish children in Judaism, and that was forbidden in Russia. So he was put into prison on the 14th of June 1927, but he was liberated 18 days later on Gimmel Tammuz. So he got his liberation on Gimmel Tammuz, and that liberation is celebrated amongst the Lubavitch Hasidim, being the fact that from that led to his movement to America, where he established headquarters in 770. And that's when Menachem Mendel Schneerson took over after his death on the 10th of Shvat, and Menachem Schneerson became the Rebbe, the 7th Rebbe then, and he passed away, Menachem Mendel passed away on Gimmel Tammuz, and the Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchok, said to his son-in-law, who was the Menachem Mendel, was his son, it wasn't his son, it was his son-in-law, he said, Gimmel Tammuz is our day, is our special day. So, and it was a special day because Menachem Mendel died on that day. You might think, how can I say this special day? Sometime I'll talk about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who also died on Lag BaOmer, and he said you should celebrate my death when it comes about, rather than to mourn it, because the day of death is when the soul is liberated from the body and goes up, and therefore has a great effect upon the world. At least a tzaddik, a righteous person, can have a great effect on the world after his death than when he is in the body, because the soul is limited when it's in the body. So Menachem Mendel died on the 12th of June 1994 on Gimmel Tammuz, which is Gimmel Tammuz, the Hebrew date Gimmel Tammuz, and that's another link to the liberation. Now a lot of people say, well, the Messiah came and he died, because they believed, many of the Hasidim believed that Menachem Mendel was Messiah before I even played with the gematrias, right? And it looked pretty likely that he was, but then he died. Can the Messiah come and die? That is an interesting question. The Rambam says the Messiah will come, but he cannot be killed. And so, but he doesn't say he can't die. That's the question, whether he can die. But there are many sources, and I bring in this book some sources that state the Messiah would come and would die. Just from the Zohar, the back page, I've got here a quote. It says, since this lower plateau, this lower world, lacks the vitality of godliness, this Messiah must die. He will remain dead until this plateau receives life from the higher plateau, at which point he will rise and come to life. So we have the idea that the Messiah will come and have Techiyat Hametim, a resurrection. And there's a prayer that we say in the morning: who is like you, a king who kills and enlivens and then causes salvation to sprout forth. So we see a particular order, and there is an argument as to whether this is the order, but this is within the prayers. We say that there's going to be death, and then there's going to be enlivenment, there's going to be resurrection, and then there's salvation. Whether that applies to the people or whether that applies to the Messiah is another question. And I bring some other sources as well. There is from the Barbanel, who says that Messiah can come from the dead. So it's not the only sources. There are other sources that show that Messiah will come and die and then come back again. And that, of course, raises the question then, why hasn't that been so known amongst the Jewish people, sort of been hidden from the Jewish people? Because not many people have known that. And only after the death of the Menachem Mendel was this brought to light, because he died. And people thought, well, how can he be the Messiah then? And the answer is, well, he could. And of course it causes problems with Christianity, because Christians will say, oh, well, then the Messiah can come and die and come back again. And therefore, why isn't Jesus accepted the Messiah by the Jews? Again, that's something which I'll go into. There are many other reasons why Jesus is not accepted to be Messiah amongst the Jewish people, and that we need to look in a more theological way on the arguments. But I'm here to just show you the connections, and if you want to believe, as I showed you in last lecture, that Jesus is Messiah and Menachem Mendel is Messiah, and they're both Messiah, and one comes into the other, and there's a reincarnation of one on the other. That's entirely up to you. I'm just going to show you that these connections that exist between one and another. I've got more to show you yet. But I'm going to go back to this idea. I'm going to go back to Gibeon. Just one more gematria associated with this number 456, which many of the Hasidim of Lubavitch was saying, so Messiah's died, he's not the Messiah anymore. And then you had a lot of, oh, but he is the Messiah. And so you had this new gematria, Od Mashiach Chai, which means Messiah is still, Od means still, Mashiach Chai, still Messiah lives, Messiah still lives. And that has the gematria of using the normal value of 456. So those Lubavitchers were saying Menachem Mendel was Mashiach still, even though he died. Came up with this quote, which was quite interesting, Od Mashiach Chai. And it didn't seem to convince those Lubavitchers that didn't think he was Mashiach. So there's two camps within the Hasidic group of Lubavitch. In Hebrew, liberation is Geula. And here's an interesting connection. So Geula is redemption or liberation. Geula. Okay, Geula has a gematria, and I'm going to use now the large value. We'll take this is Gimmel, is the third letter, and the word 3 in English is 56. Aleph is 1, 1 is 34. Vav is 6, and the word 6 is 52, Lamed is 12, and 12 is 87, and Hay is 5, and 5 is 42. Okay, and if I add those up, I'll get 271, that I call the large value. This is the intertwining of English and Hebrew together. Right? If I take the words, let me just make some room here. I seem to be writing big letters today. If I take the words 456, alright, remember that's our number of Gula or Gimmel Tammuz, 456, 456, and I work out that in placement value I get 271. So I've got this, placement value. I've got this connection between 451 and Gula in Hebrew, which also means liberation. So connected to that number 271 are the 5 kings that came to attack Gibeon, the city of Gibeon. Their names are Adoni Tzedek and Hoham and Peram, Japhia, and Debir in English. So these are the English names, and I'm going to write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 their placement values, which is 86, 45, 57, 45, and 38. And if I add those together, I get 271. That's the placement value of all those. So I've got this number 271 connected to Geula, connected to their names, which is quite interesting. So now we're going to connect these because this event to the Gimmel Tammuz, which the Rebbe passed away, and we will see some interesting things. Now, Gibeon was on a mountain, was on a high hill. It was a fortress, and when the Gibeonites asked Joshua to come up, they said, "Come up quickly." So we see "come up" means that it was high. In the book of Chronicles, Divrei Yamim, it says it talks about the high place of Gibeon. So Gibeon was a hill. The word in Hebrew, this is Gibeon. That's Gibeon, and its root is Giv'ah. And Giv'ah is a hill. Right, that's the root. Giv'ah is a hill. So we're going to show how this is connected to the idea, or it's hinting to the Messiah. First of all, hill, if we take the normal value, well, that's 30, L is 30, I is 9, and H is 8. We get 77, which we had last lecture, was Christ in the first place, in the placement value. So we see hill is indicative of Christ, which is the anointed. We have hill, so there's a metaphor coming out from all this, which I'm going to explain. So we have a hill also in the placement value of 41. That's the placement value, and that's the same as king, and it's the same in Hebrew as Hamelech. The placement value of king in Hebrew is also Hamelech. The king is also 41. We had last lecture the anointed was connected to the kingship, because anointed equals 115, and that's the same as King Messiah. So we have all these links to the anointed or the king, and we can also show another connection. Now, the word valley, we've got hill in the normal value. This is the normal value for hill, but if you take valley, where valley has a placement value of 77, so we see another connection here of 77. The valley would be 110 placement value, which is the same as the Christ, because obviously adding the to either. So we see this connection. The word the Christ and the word Hamelech HaMashiach also have the same value of 110. Melech HaMashiach If I write out Hamelech, the King Messiah in Hebrew, Hamelech Ha-Moshiach is also 110. And remember I showed you the Caduceus number pillar where I had 0, 7, 0, 1, 6, 1, 2, 5, 2, etc. going up all the way. And this number here, 70, is the time value of 770, of 110, which is the beginning of this book. This is also the gematria of Nes, which is the rod which God tells Moses to put the serpent on to save the Israelites from being bitten by serpents, and to save them, Moses was told to take a mace, which usually means a miracle, a nace, but it also means a banner, it also means a rod, and put this copper serpent on it so that the Israelites will look upon it and be saved. And that's all connected to Caduceus, that's all connected to nace, to Christ, because Caduceus is 77 as well, and it's connected to salvation and redemption and healing. So I won't go into that at the moment. So we'll do all of that. So we looked at here, mountain, yes, that's what I'm. So also, mountain is also a metaphor for Messiah, and I'll show you that one. And then I'm going to explain to you how scientifically it was possible that the Earth, that the sun would stop still, and it's only a supposition, a possibility. Now, mountain, I'm going to use the normal values, where m is 40, 60, these are the decimal values. I get 710, and that's the normal value. And if I take the King Messiah in English, and I use the placement value is 148. The normal value is 562. That's the normal value. They seem to be using the normal value quite a lot, and we find that that's also 710. So we get this what I call the total value. So we get this connection between the mountain and the King Messiah, or hill and the King Messiah. We can see what the metaphor is, that person who stands above everybody else, who shines out above everybody else, and he is the luminary that will illuminate our lives and our minds. So we can see a connection between light there. The sun and the moon I go into more detail in this book, and I explain how there's connection. I have got one here that's that will be of interest. Well, I've got a few actually. Let's give you an idea. The coming together of the hill and the valley. We had the valley plus the hill. The valley is 77, the hill was 41. That was the placement values. Gives me 118. If you take Menachem Mendel, final mem, Mendel, that's an iron, nun, daled, lamed. Right, that is 118 in the alternative placement value. Alternative, the mem is 13th letter, but the final mem can be either 13 or it can be 24 if you place the final letters at the end of the Aleph Beit. So you get Taf, which is the last letter, which is 22. Then you get the first final letter, which is final Chaf, which is 23. And then you get final Mem, which is 24. So that will be 24. And I call that the alternative placement value. I'm going to change my pen. So if I add all those letters together, Menachem Mendel equals 118. And so does Schneerson. His surname is Schnee or, let's use the block, or son. See, I quite often get this the wrong way around. No, it's okay. So Schneerson, also with the final mem, final nun, sorry, at the end of the Aleph Beit is 25. Okay, and that will also give me 118. If I take the placement value, so this would therefore be the normal values for the placement value, so this will be 13 and not 24, and this will be 14 and not 25, right? Then I'll get 107 and 107. They'll both also be the same. Doesn't matter if I use the alternative placement value or the placement value, the Nachamenda will equal both. Okay, 107 is the same thing as the Messiah in placement value. That's the is 33, 74 is 107. So in his normal placement values, the PV, 107 is the Messiah. In this one, we see that it's connected to the valley and the hill. What does that mean, the valley and the hill? So if we look at the actual Hebrew words for those valley and the hill, we will get the following. The Hebrew for the valley is called Amek, the valley of Ayalon, and that has a normal value of 307. Okay, so Kaf is 100, Mem is 40, Ayin is 70, and Givon we've had before. Give on, and that has a normal value of 131. Alright, so now you've got to be the same systems. I can't make one system large value or whatever and add it to a normal value. If we're going to add these together, they've got to be the same to have any significance. Otherwise, there's no end to different permutations you can have, and it will be fairly meaningless. So if I add these together, I get 438, and in English, Messiah equals 438 in the large value. We had that I think last time. So there is an interesting verse when it talks about that the sun stood still over Givon and the moon over the valley Amek Elon, over the valley of Elon. It uses the word the sun, which is Hashemesh, and instead of using the word the moon, which is actually translated that way, it misses out the word the in the Hebrew. So it's just got moon. So they put the English, the word the, to make it sense. So the sun and the moon. But in Hebrew, it's missing. So you get Hashemesh in the Hebrew, Hashemesh, with the hay. The hay means the, right? And you get in the Hebrew Yerech and not Hayerech. It's missing the hay. The hay is not there. So why? If you take the gematria of these, we're going to use the placement value. This is 5, 21, 13, 21 is 60. And this one gives you 38. I get together 98. And that is the same as Hamelech HaMashiach. Now, we had Hamelech HaMashiach before, equaling 110, the King Messiah. And now I'm saying equals Mashiach. Talk when I write, and I'll get anywhere. Now I'm going to say it's 98, because now I'm going to use the Chaf as the, not the alternative value. It's normally 11. If it's at the end of the alphabet, it's 23. So there's a difference of 12. So if I take it as a normal Chaf, so it's 11. Alright? So it doesn't have an equal sign. So it's 11 gives me 98. If I take it as 23, I'll get 110. So both are the same, Hamelech HaMashiach, but this one is with the placement value, and this is the alternative placement value. In this case, it has the same thing as Hashemesh and Yereach. So we see this connection between the valley and the hill, the idea of these two entities, the sun and the moon, which I won't go into here, but you can see in the book how it's connected to Mashiach. This idea of these two entities, two things coming together. There is a concept in Judaism of two messiahs. One is called the Mashiach ben Yosef, this Messiah son of Joseph, who's supposed to come and fight the wars of God. Then there's Mashiach ben David, who's supposed to bring peace. But it's rather vague actually what Mashiach ben Yosef is actually going to be, when he's going to live. There are intimations that actually they come together as one unit of a person. They're initially separate, and then they come together as one. And the Rebbe said that himself, if I remember rightly, the Lubavitch Rebbe, he said that the Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David become one entity. So what that means, I'm not certain, but is it just come back as one person, or as a concept as they work together? There are teachings that Mashiach ben Yosef will be an advisor to Mashiach ben David. Lot of stuff written on it, but not 100%. There are a lot of differences to make it difficult to know what's going to actually happen. So, okay, so we've seen that this connection between the moon, well, we haven't seen the moon and the sun is related, but we see where they parked over are related to the Messiah, the idea of the redemption in that time, the salvation of Gibeon, the significance of this pact between the Gibeonites and Joshua. So there's a lot more to be said upon that. I'm just going to mention how it will possibly be that the sun and the moon will stop still. So, and I think this will make a very good film, because I've not seen a film made of this battle of Gibeon before, and it's quite amazing. So I'll be very, very quick, because there are two possibilities that are involved. And I talk about the idea of a meteorite coming close to the Earth. Does the sun and the moon stop still, or does the Earth stop spinning? That's the question. And for the sun and the moon to stop still, it seems that quite possibly the Earth sort of slowed down, at least to the speed at which the sun and the moon are going around the Earth, or apparently going around the Earth. So, in other words, the speed that they're traversing across the sky will suddenly slow down and come to still, because the Earth is gradually slowing down. What would stop the Earth spinning around, and what effect would that have upon people? So, if the Earth's core is very magnetic, which we know it's magnetic, but it's also very, maybe it's solid, or it's got a very iron core there in the Earth, then if a meteorite comes to the Earth and it itself is a magnet, it has a magnetic field, then it will draw the core of the Earth to one side. And you know that when, like, ballerinas or ice skaters want to do a fast spin, they move their arms towards the body. If they want to slow down, they move their arms outwards, so that they create a greater inertia. And in that way, they will slow down. So if the Earth's core is shifted towards one side due to the fact that you've got a comet hovering above the Earth, and it draws it over, then the Earth would slow down its speed of circulation, of spin. So if it slows down in its spin, then things on the Earth that will be used to the fact that the Earth is spinning around will find themselves like on a train that's slowing down. You feel pulled forward, or so you can imagine that as the Earth is slowing down, the soldiers, if the Israelites are coming in the right direction, where they can move fast, it's like, you can speed up if you're in the right direction of the wind. When the wind's blowing, you can speed up. If you're in the wrong direction of the wind, you have a trouble. And so the Gibeonites, they're not the Gibeonites, the Amorites, were at loss to the Israelites, because they were going in the wrong direction. So these are just scenarios that I think could possibly have taken place. Another scenario possibly could have taken place if you've got this big comet coming over. It's got a magnetic force field. You can imagine if they're holding iron spears and iron shields, that it might suddenly start flying into the air. You can use your imagination about what might have taken place there, and you can maybe think what a good film that would make. But there are possibilities that how the sun and the moon could have stopped still. Of course, it could also be that God does miracles in ways that are completely out of natural order. So, I hope you enjoyed that. If you're interested in this book, Gimmel Tammuz, it's available on my website, worlddiscoveries.com, and And if you like this lecture, please give me a like, and if you haven't subscribed, join us, and you'll see more lectures coming up soon. Right, so I'm going to continue this subject intermittently on Mashiach, on Messiah, along with news items which I'm preparing at the moment.